Dr. Sarah Chen's quantum processor hit another recursion error at exactly the wrong moment. The holographic display above her wrist interface flickered with angry red warnings as she hurried through the gleaming corridors of orbital station Helios. Her 7-year-old son Alex's hand clasped firmly in hers. "Mom, you're walking too fast," Alex complained, his small legs working double time to keep up with her stride. His backpack, adorned with representations of various subatomic particles, bounced against his shoulders. "Sorry, sweetie," Sarah said, slowing slightly but not stopping. "The quantum entanglement readings from the new processor are showing some anomalous behavior, and I need to get to the board meeting in." She checked the time display floating in her augmented reality contact lens. 12 minutes ago. The hallways of Helios Station's upper levels were a marvel of human engineering, with smart glass walls that adjusted their opacity based on the space traffic visible beyond. Today, they showed a steady stream of vessels from a dozen different worlds, all drawn to humanity's premier research and development hub. Sarah was supposed to be presenting Quantum Core's latest breakthrough to the board, a processor that could maintain quantum coherence at room temperature. It would revolutionize everything from computing to deep space navigation, if she could just get it working properly. The Daycare Center was supposed to be on level 42, just 2 floors below her office. She'd made this trip hundreds of times since accepting the CEO position at Quantum Core 3 years ago. Today, though, her mind was elsewhere, processing quantum algorithms while her muscle memory guided her steps. That's why she didn't notice the subtle differences in the corridor's architecture. The way the lighting had a slight bluish tinge, the faint shimmer in the air that indicated a different atmospheric mix, the elegant flowing script on the wall displays that definitely wasn't in any human language. "Mom." Alex tugged at her hand again. "This looks different." "It's fine, honey," Sarah said automatically, her attention fixed on the error messages still scrolling across her vision. "Here we are." The doors slid open with a musical chime rather than their usual whoosh. Sarah ushered Alex inside, barely glancing at the reception area. "I'll pick you up at the usual time, okay? Be good." It wasn't until she was halfway to the executive conference room that her brain finally processed what her eyes had seen. The tall, elegantly proportioned figure behind the reception desk hadn't been human. Its skin had been a deep indigo, with patterns of bioluminescent markings that shifted like starlight on water. And the other children in the room. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks, causing a maintenance bot to swerve around her with an indignant beep. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no." She had just left her son at the Zetherian Education Pod, the special facility where the station's resident alien scientists and diplomats sent their children. Humans weren't even supposed to have access to that level without special clearance. Somehow in her distraction, she'd gone up instead of down, ending up on level 44 instead of 42. Sarah spun around, ready to race back, when her wrist interface chimed with an urgent message. The board was threatening to start the meeting without her. The quantum processor demonstration couldn't wait. They had investors from 3 different star systems attending virtually. She bit her lip, torn between professional responsibility and maternal panic. The Zetherians were known for their advanced scientific knowledge and strict ethical codes. Alex would be safe with them for a few minutes. She just had to get through this presentation. Then she could sort out the diplomatic nightmare she'd just created. What Sarah couldn't know was that her simple navigational error was about to change the course of human-Zetherian relations forever. Because while she rushed to her meeting, Alex was about to make a discovery that would save both their species, if only the adults could learn to see the universe through a child's eyes. In the Zetherian Education Pod, Alex stood in the center of a room that seemed to breathe with light. The indigo-skinned teacher, a Zetherian named Varine, had immediately recognized him as human but showed no surprise at his presence. Instead, she simply adjusted the environmental controls to human standard atmosphere in his vicinity and invited him to join the morning's lesson. "Today, young ones," Varine said in perfect English, her voice carrying harmonics that made Alex think of wind through crystal. "We are studying the mathematical patterns that govern stellar evolution. Would our human guest like to share how his people understand the dance of the stars?" Alex looked around at his alien classmates. Their faces were different from human children, more angular, with those fascinating light patterns rippling beneath their skin. But their expressions showed the same curiosity he felt. He smiled and stepped forward, pulling his tablet from his backpack. "Well," he said, "my mom's company just developed a quantum processor that can model stellar decay rates. Want to see how it works?" The Zetherian children leaned forward, their bioluminescent patterns brightening with interest. And in that moment, in a classroom 44 levels above Earth's surface, a bridge began to form between two species who had far more to learn from each other than either had imagined. Meanwhile, Sarah stood before the board, trying to focus on quantum coherence rates, while a small part of her brain wondered if she just triggered an interstellar incident. She couldn't have known that her error would turn out to be the most brilliant mistake she'd ever made. Sarah's presentation to the board had gone surprisingly well, despite her distraction. The quantum processor's recursion errors had actually revealed an interesting pattern in space-time fluctuations that the investors found intriguing. But now, 3 hours later, she stood outside the Zetherian education pod, her corporate confidence evaporating as she faced Vareen. "Dr. Chen," the Zetherian educator said, her bioluminescent patterns forming what Sarah recognized as their species' expression of deep interest. "Your son's presence here today has been most illuminating." Sarah braced herself for diplomatic outrage, but Vareen continued, "He has shown our students a perspective on quantum mathematics that we had not considered. Tell me, did you intentionally program your processor to account for temporal gravity waves?" "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah blinked, momentarily forgetting her planned apology. "The processor isn't designed to detect gravity waves. It's purely for quantum computational." She trailed off as Vareen gestured to a holographic display floating in the center of the now empty classroom. It showed the error messages from her processor, but interleaved with them were patterns she hadn't noticed before. Regular oscillations in the quantum field that looked almost like heartbeats, Alex said, appearing at her side. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Mom, the stars have heartbeats. The Zetherian kids showed me how to see it in their stellar maps, and when I showed them your processor data, Vareen helped us combine them. Look." The hologram shifted, merging Sarah's quantum readings with what appeared to be Zetherian astronomical data. The pattern was unmistakable, and deeply troubling to Sarah's trained eye. "This can't be right," she muttered, stepping closer to the display. "These oscillations, they're accelerating." "Indeed," Vareen said softly. "We have been tracking similar anomalies in several nearby star systems, but our models could not fully explain them. Your quantum processor, designed to think in ways our systems do not, has provided the missing variable." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If these readings are correct, then the quantum fabric of space itself is becoming unstable in this sector. But that would mean... "Mom." Alex tugged at her sleeve. "Remember that game you showed me with the quantum entanglement simulator? The one where if you don't balance the particles, everything goes wrong. It's like that, but with stars." Sarah stared at her son, then back at the display. He was right. The pattern matched the cascade failure simulations she used to teach him about quantum physics through games. Except this wasn't a game. This was real, and it was happening on a stellar scale. "How long?" she asked Vareen. "At the current rate of acceleration. 6 months before the first star in the affected region becomes critically unstable. Perhaps a year before the effect reaches heliostation." Sarah's wrist interface chimed with another board notification. They wanted to fast-track the quantum processor for commercial production. They had no idea that it had just helped discover an impending disaster. "We need to tell them," she said. "Both are species authorities. This affects everyone in this sector of space." Vareen's luminescence dimmed slightly. "Dr. Chen, you must understand. There are those among both our peoples who would prefer to keep our species' scientific knowledge separate. They believe that too much sharing of technology could lead to complications, like the kind of complications that come from letting multiple star systems destabilize. Sarah asked sharply. Then she took a deep breath, remembering she was still technically an unauthorized intruder in their facility. I apologize, but surely this situation calls for cooperation. Perhaps, Vareen said, her patterns shifting thoughtfully, but it will require careful handling. There are protocols, diplomatic channels. Or, Alex piped up, we could just keep working together like we did today. The other kids already figured out lots of stuff about Mum's processor that she didn't know. And I learned about stellar mapping techniques that humans haven't invented yet. If we tell the grown-ups, they'll just make it complicated. Sarah looked at her son with a mixture of pride and concern. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. But he had a point. The discovery had been made through spontaneous collaboration, free from political constraints. What if, she said slowly, we developed the solution first? Present both our governments with not just the problem, but the answer. Vareen's luminescence brightened. An interesting proposal. It would certainly be harder for either side to reject a working solution. She paused. The children's collaborative session today was remarkably productive. Perhaps similar sessions could be arranged. Unofficially, of course. Sarah thought about the board, about diplomatic protocols, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about the pattern of stellar heartbeats growing more erratic by the day. Alex's regular daycare does have an unfortunate tendency to lose his registration data, she said carefully. It might take weeks to sort out the paperwork. In the meantime, since he's already here. Vareen's patterns formed what Sarah now recognized as a smile. We would be happy to continue hosting him. For educational purposes only, of course. Of course, Sarah agreed. Now about those temporal gravity waves. As she and Vareen bent over the holographic display, Alex smiled to himself. He hadn't told them about the other thing he and the Zetherian children had discovered. The way the quantum fluctuations seemed to form a kind of music when processed through both human and Zetherian algorithms simultaneously. He had a feeling that might turn out to be important later. Sometimes, he thought, grown-ups made things too complicated. Sometimes you just had to listen to the songs the universe was trying to sing. 3 weeks had transformed the quiet Zetherian education pod into something unprecedented in human-alien relations. What had started as an accidental cultural exchange was now an impromptu joint research facility, even if nobody was officially calling it that. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor beside Vareen, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing stellar decay patterns. Around them, human and Zetherian children worked together in small groups, their natural ability to ignore species differences proving invaluable to the project. The cascade effect is accelerating, Sarah said quietly, manipulating a 3D model of the affected star systems. We've lost 2 weeks from our original estimate. Vareen's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with concern. The gravitational harmonics are becoming more erratic. The Centauri system is showing early signs of quantum destabilization. From a nearby workstation, Alex called out, Mom, Kiri, and I found something. He was working with a young Zetherian, whose patterns formed intricate mathematical sequences when she was deep in thought. Sarah and Vareen moved to their station, where a complex simulation was playing out. Alex had somehow merged his mother's quantum processing algorithms with Zetherian gravitational mathematics, creating a hybrid model that showed something entirely new. See? Alex pointed excitedly. The stars aren't just dying. They're singing to each other. Listen. He adjusted a control, and suddenly the room filled with an ethereal harmony. The quantum fluctuations translated into sound. Each destabilizing star contributed its own tone to a growing discord. Fascinating, Vareen murmured. The quantum decay patterns do appear to have a harmonic structure. But how does this help us? Because, Kiri chimed in, her patterns flickering with excitement, If we can understand the song, we can change it. Look what happens when we introduce a counter-harmony. The young Zetherian manipulated her people's gravitational technology, while Alex adjusted the quantum processors. The discordant stellar song began to shift, finding a new equilibrium. "They're right," Sarah breathed, watching the simulation's decay rates stabilize. "We don't need to stop the quantum cascade. We need to guide it into a stable pattern." A sudden commotion at the pod's entrance interrupted their breakthrough. Director Halston from Quantum Core's board stormed in, followed by a delegation of both human and Zetherian officials. "Dr. Chen," Halston's face was red with anger. "Would you care to explain why you've been sharing proprietary quantum technology with an alien species, and why you've turned a children's facility into an unauthorized research lab?" Behind him, a tall Zetherian official radiated patterns of severe disapproval. "Educator Vareen, this is a serious breach of cultural exchange protocols. The education pod is not cleared for joint scientific research." Sarah stepped forward. But Alex spoke first. "You don't understand. The stars are sick, and we're helping them get better. Children should not interfere in matters beyond their comprehension," the Zetherian official stated coldly. "With respect," Vareen countered, her patterns showing controlled intensity. "These children have comprehended something that we adults missed, the fundamental interconnectedness of our scientific approaches." Sarah quickly pulled up the simulation data. The stellar quantum cascade isn't just a theory anymore. It's happening, and it's accelerating. But we found a potential solution, one that only works by combining human quantum computing with Zetherian gravitational technology. "Even if what you're saying is true," Halston scoffed, "these are proprietary corporate technologies. There are patents to consider, treaties to negotiate. The stars don't care about patents." Alex shouted, surprising everyone. "Mom, show them the Centauri readings." Sarah projected the latest data. The room fell silent as they watched the stellar stability metrics trending rapidly downward. "How long?" the Zetherian official asked quietly. 4 months until critical cascade failure begins. After that, we lose a star system every week." Sarah met their eyes steadily. "Unless we implement our solution immediately." "A solution developed by children playing with technology they don't understand," Halston sneered. Kiri's patterns flashed with what Sarah had learned was the Zetherian equivalent of indignation. "We understand that the universe doesn't recognize your artificial boundaries. The stars sing in one language. Why shouldn't we listen with all our ears?" Vareen moved to stand beside Sarah. "Perhaps it took children to show us this truth because they haven't yet learned to limit their thinking to one species' perspective." The officials huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers. Sarah felt Alex slip his hand into hers, and she squeezed it reassuringly. Whatever happened next, her son had helped forge something remarkable here. A true collaboration between species that transcended political boundaries. Finally, the Zetherian official turned back to them, patterns showing reluctant acceptance. "We will need to establish proper protocols for this joint research initiative. And Quantum Core will need guarantees about intellectual property rights," Halston added stiffly. "Of course," Sarah agreed diplomatically. "But first, would you like to hear what the stars are trying to tell us?" She nodded to Alex and Kiri, who adjusted their instruments. The room filled once again with the haunting melody of stellar song, now accompanied by the stabilizing harmony they have discovered. As the officials listened, their expressions and patterns shifted from skepticism to wonder. In that moment, Sarah realized that they had achieved something far beyond saving star systems. They had found a new way for their species to work together, to listen not just to each other, but to the very music of the cosmos. And it had all started because she'd gotten off on the wrong floor. The newly christened Joint Stellar Stabilization Initiative had transformed 3 decks of Helios Station into a buzzing hive of human and Zetherian collaboration. Sarah barely remembered what sleep felt like anymore, but the sight of scientists from both species working side by side made the exhaustion worthwhile. The first test of their harmonic stabilization system was scheduled for tomorrow. They would attempt to dampen the quantum cascade effect in a single star, one already showing dangerous levels of instability, but far enough from populated systems to minimize risk if something went wrong. Final diagnostics are complete on the quantum core, Sarah announced, reviewing the holographic readouts floating before her, ready for integration with the gravitational resonators. Vareen nodded, her patterns showing focused determination as she supervised the Zetherian engineering team. The resonator array is charging. Harmonic frequencies are aligned with the stellar soundtrack your son helped us identify. Alex and Curie sat nearby with other children from both species, monitoring a simplified version of the control systems. Over the past weeks, the kids had proven remarkably adept at spotting pattern anomalies that the adults sometimes missed. Their uncluttered minds, freed from theoretical preconceptions, often saw connections that more educated observers overlooked. A sudden fluctuation in the power grid made the lights flicker. Sarah frowned, checking her readings. That's odd. We're getting power irregularities in the main quantum processor. The gravitational resonators are showing similar instabilities, Vareen reported, her patterns shifting to show concern. But the source isn't in our systems. Alex looked up from his monitor. Mom, something's wrong with the harmonic patterns. They're all scratchy. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red warning lights pulsed as security barriers slammed into place. Unauthorized access detected in primary control systems. The station's AI announced, critical system failure imminent. Containment protocols initiated. Sarah's fingers flew across her interface. Someone's hacked into both the quantum and gravitational control systems. They're trying to force a feedback loop between them. If they succeed, the resulting quantum gravitational surge could destabilize the station's entire power grid, Vareen said grimly. And tomorrow's stellar stabilization attempt would trigger a cascade failure instead of preventing it. Sarah finished. She hit her emergency override codes, but nothing happened. They've locked us out of the system. Through the observation window, she could see security teams rushing past, their weapons drawn. But this wasn't a problem they could shoot their way out of. Mom, Alex called urgently. Remember that game you made me play? The one about quantum entanglement? Not now, honey, Sarah said distractedly, still trying to regain control of her systems. But Mom, in the game, when the bad guys tried to mess up the quantum particles, we had to think like the particles. We had to dance with them. Sarah froze. She turned to Vareen, whose patterns were beginning to pulse with understanding. The harmony, they said simultaneously. Quick, Sarah commanded. Get all the children to their stations. Alex, show them that quantum dance game you played. Vareen, have your students demonstrate their gravitational visualization exercises. As the adults rushed to make adjustments, the children began working with their simplified interfaces. Alex led the human kids in using the quantum harmonics controls while Curie guided the Zetherian children through gravitational wave manipulation. They're trying to force our systems to fight each other, Sarah explained as she worked. But if we can get them to resonate instead, we match their frequencies, Vareen continued, her patterns brightening. Create a harmony instead of discord. On their junior consoles, the children were already doing exactly that. Where the hackers tried to create destructive interference between quantum and gravitational forces, the kids guided the systems into complementary patterns. They weren't fighting the attack, they were dancing with it. Warning lights continued to flash, but the violent shuddering in the station's power grid began to smooth out. Sarah watched in amazement as the quantum readings shifted from chaos to complex but stable patterns. It's working, she exclaimed. The harmonic resonance is absorbing the feedback loop. Vareen, can you trace the intrusion source? The Zetherian educator's patterns flickered with satisfaction. Already done. The attack came from a terminal in Director Halston's private office. Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course. The Quantum Core board member had been increasingly vocal about his opposition to sharing technology with the Zetherians. He must have decided to sabotage the project rather than let it succeed. Security teams would handle Halston, but Sarah's mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's test. If someone had tried this hard to stop them, they must be on the right track. "Mom," Alex said quietly, "the stars are still singing. They're just waiting for us to help them dance." Sarah looked at her son, then at all the children, human and Cytherian, who had just helped save the station through their innate understanding of harmony. Tomorrow, they would attempt something even more ambitious, teaching a dying star how to dance to a new rhythm. But first, she had a board meeting to call. It was time to explain to Quantum Core's leadership why their future lay not in proprietary technology, but in learning to dance with the universe itself, and with their new alien partners. As if reading her thoughts, Varine's patterns formed the Cytherian expression for shared purpose. "Perhaps," she said, "we should let the children present the demonstration." Sarah smiled. After all, they were the ones who truly understood that the most important technological breakthrough wasn't the quantum processors or gravitational resonators. It was learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. The observation deck of Helios Station had never been so crowded. Delegates from both human and Cytherian governments stood shoulder to shoulder, their attention fixed on the massive display showing a distant, dying star. Its quantum signature pulsed erratically, a visual representation of the discord they hoped to resolve. Sarah and Varine had insisted that the children be present for this moment. Alex, Curie, and their friends sat at specially designed interfaces, their smaller control panels tied into the main systems. After yesterday's crisis, no one dared question their inclusion. "Primary quantum core online," Sarah announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Harmonic resonance patterns loaded and stable. Gravitational resonators at full power, Varine confirmed, her patterns showing the complex mathematics of anticipation. Field projection reaching optimal range. In the center of the room, a holographic representation of their target star hung like a troubled jewel. Its surface roiled with quantum distortions, the very fabric of space-time beginning to fray around its edges. "Remember," Sarah addressed the assembled officials, "what you're about to witness isn't just about saving stars. It's about what we can achieve when we stop thinking in binaries. Human or alien, adult or child, quantum or gravitational. The universe doesn't recognize our divisions." She nodded to Alex and Curie. "Show them how it's done." The children began their work, their hands moving across their interfaces with practiced coordination. The quantum harmonics they had discovered weeks ago filled the chamber, not just sound, but a representation of space-time itself singing. On the main display, the star's erratic pulses began to shift. Where there had been chaos, patterns emerged. The quantum cascade effect that threatened to tear it apart began to stabilize, finding new rhythms in the combined influence of human and Cytherian technology. "Quantum coherence improving," Sarah reported. "Field strength at 60% and climbing. Gravitational harmonics aligning," Varine added. "The star's core is responding to the resonance patterns." A murmur went through the crowd as the holographic display showed the star's surface beginning to calm. The violent quantum fluctuations that had threatened to trigger a cascade failure across multiple systems were smoothing out, finding a new equilibrium. But then alarms began to sound. "We have an anomaly," Sarah called out, fingers flying across her controls. "The quantum field is showing unexpected interference patterns." Varine's luminescence flickered with concern. "The gravitational resonance is destabilizing. We're losing harmonic coherence." The star's song began to turn discordant again. Sarah felt panic rising. They couldn't fail now, not with both species leadership watching. Not with so many lives at stake. "Mom." Alex's voice cut through her fear. "We need to let go." "What?" "The controls. We're trying too hard to make it perfect. But look at the patterns. The star wants to make its own song. We just need to help it find the right rhythm." Sarah looked at Varine, who was receiving similar insight from Curie. The Cytherian educator's patterns showed sudden understanding. Of course, Varine said. We've been trying to impose our solution, when we should have been listening to what the star itself is trying to tell us, Sarah finished. They quickly adjusted their approach. Instead of forcing the quantum and gravitational fields into predetermined patterns, they began to work with the star's natural harmonics. The children had already intuited this, their simple interfaces allowing them to feel the rhythms more directly. The discordant notes began to resolve. On the main display, the star's quantum signature stabilized into a new pattern, not the one they had planned, but something more robust, more natural. Quantum cascade effect neutralize, Sarah announced, relief evident in her voice. The star is maintaining stability through its own harmonic resonance. We've done it, Varine confirmed, her patterns radiating joy. The first successful stellar stabilization. The observation deck erupted in cheers, and the Zetherian equivalent of applause. A rippling wave of synchronized bioluminescence. But Sarah's attention was on Alex, who was grinning at his alien friend Kiri. See, he said, the stars just needed us to help them remember how to dance. Hours later, after the celebrations had died down, and the politicians had retreated to draft new cooperation treaties, Sarah stood with Varine in the now quiet education pod. They watched through the window as their children played together, inventing some hybrid game that seemed to involve both quantum physics and Cytherean mathematical principles. We're going to need a new name for this facility, Sarah mused. It's not just a daycare or a research center anymore. Varine's patterns formed what Sarah now recognized as a smile. Perhaps we should let the children decide. They seem to have a gift for seeing past our artificial categories. They do, don't they? Sarah watched as Alex demonstrated a quantum principle using a hand game, while Kiri translated it into Zetherian mathematical symbols. Sometimes I wonder if that's not the real breakthrough we made here. The ability to stabilize dying stars is certainly significant, Varine agreed. But teaching our species to see through each other's eyes, that may prove even more valuable in the long run. Outside the window, the stars shone steadily, their quantum songs now a symphony of harmony rather than discord. Somewhere out there, the star they had helped today was dancing to its new rhythm, not purely human, not purely Zetherian, but something wonderfully, perfectly hybrid. And it had all started because a busy CEO had gotten off on the wrong floor of a space station, proving that sometimes the best discoveries happen when we lose our way just enough to find a better path. Mom, Alex called from across the room. We figured out how to make the quantum harmonics visible in Cytherean math. Want to see? Sarah smiled at Varine. Shall we go learn from our teachers? The Zetherian educator's patterns sparkled with amusement. Indeed. After all, the universe still has so many songs to teach us. Together, they went to join their children, ready to see what new wonders would emerge from this unprecedented collaboration. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone, but that they could now explore together, guided by the wisdom of those young enough to know that the most important boundaries are the ones we choose to transcend.